Good morning, everyone. I'm Deepthi. I'm consulting editor of Envoy Excellency magazine. So before proceeding further, let me give you a quick brief of Envoy Excellency magazine. Envoy Excellency magazine is a monthly magazine backed by DN Media Group. It is specifically covers diplomatic community worldwide, foreign and national affairs. It is also covers politics, medical tourism, and tourism. So today it's our great pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Minoo Dastur, Director, President, and CEO of Nihilent. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Deepthi, very much.
So, Nihilent is a global consulting and services company that uses human-centered approach for problem solving and change management. We all know Mr. Minoo Dastur is a leading business tycoon. So, my first question is to you, sir. When Nihilent came into being, it was an interesting time as the world was just coming out of the Y2K conundrum. So, can you talk about the idea behind Nihilent and your vision?
Certainly, it's an interesting question. If you go back 2 decades, the big change that was taking place was that technology by itself was becoming so much a part of everybody's life that all businesses had to change their processes, their way of thinking, their way of working, to embrace the opportunities that were being presented by the new tech that was coming into the market. And it was arriving at a phenomenal rate. So there was the dot-com boom, there was the dot-com bust. There was all the transformation that was going on, which is today called digital, which really effectively means computing power at the edge in the hands of a user, which brought us to where we are today, which is user centricity. However, this journey is not easy for clients because you have to rethink everything you do, your channel strategy for sales, your distribution, your ERP, your manufacturing, your sourcing. Analytics comes in and you have mountains of data available, but it's all meaningless unless you can make it meaningful, data science. And that data science translates into pricing decisions, product pricing decisions, purchase decisions. It translates into how to attract customers, therefore into agency decisions. What's the image I want to portray of my company? So Nihilent was created to fill that space, not to be an IT firm, because we were already, all of us, 20 years or more background in traditional technology. So we knew how to set up a big IT shop, we knew how to write programs, we knew how to deliver complex solutions, multi-million-dollar solutions. But we saw that this new change, daily change, was something that was coming. And we set it up, as you said correctly, from South Africa, because our first initial investor was a South African bank, who then brought in Dimension Data and so on and so forth, and that became NTT. But we started from South Africa because of a South African bank who wanted to get onto the same wagon that I'm describing.
So my next question is to you. IT outsourcing is a crowded space. What differentiates Nihilent?
Good question in a sense, because I'm not in the IT outsourcing space at all, what I just described to you, you see. I'm actually in the management consulting space, if I look at it. Or another way to see it, I am the CXOs, and there are many CXOs in a company: chief legal, chief marketing, chief finance, chief of operations, chief of manufacturing, chief of sales, and so on. I'm the CXO's partner in translating what they want to the CIO and the CTO. And then the CIO, CTO has to use me, and then he can go along with me, and there are many clients where we do that, to the guys who do the bottom dollar stuff, which is the IT outsourcing. And I'm not saying that's not required. It's brilliant stuff, and it's $1 billion industry, but it's very different from what we do. So I will sit with you and work out how the company's scorecard translates into changes over the next 12 months into your systems. And those system changes are driven by changes to people, knowledge, technology, and process. And one part of that is IT outsourcing, which is a part of the technology piece, because even technology is big, right? It's the whole technology architecture, not just outsourcing. Outsourcing applies really to software and some services, because there is the entire infrastructure piece. On-premise infrastructure is becoming cloud infrastructure. Cloud gives me a chance to change my entire business process. I'm not tied to a machine or anything that sits in my office. Now, the minute you tell me that, as a CXO, my avenues for what I can do in terms of channel strategy change completely. How I handle distributors changes. The data I deal with changes. Now I'm touching distributor data, that's illegal. I can't do that because in every country there are the equivalent of GDPR rules that protect the data. I mean, you can see in India, recently there have been headlines that all of you would have read. And those headlines have been there in SA, in Germany, in Switzerland, in England, in America, and every operating market that I work in Australia, where countries are working to protect the data of their entities, their companies, in short, their stakeholders. So how does a company that's pan-national, that's global, deal with that? You need a partner who deals with your data for you and actually protects it in each location. And then that data is not yours because it's your distribution chain owner's data. It actually belongs to the the company. It's actually somebody else's data. That's a company incorporated in the location where I work. Let's say I sell lubricants, one of my clients does. I have to ensure the privacy and protect the confidentiality of the data from one distributor to another. From a distributor for my product versus a guy who distributes somebody else's product. And I yet have to use that data point to produce an informed decision on pricing, for example, or stocking, or logistics. So data as a service is a whole new area of business, very different from outsourcing. So that's our niche. So we're really not in the outsourcing space. It's a very competitive space into which we are going. And all these data platforms you see growing worldwide and starting to list everywhere in the world, some of them do what we do. This, by the way, is why NTT, which is one of the big players in that sort of game, is my shareholder.
Yes, sir. So moving to my next question, you can call yourself a change management company. Can you give a context behind this approach?
So I just explained that. Therefore, this constant transition, which every company has to go through, which is to remake itself. Maybe in the old days, you did it 4 or 5 times in a decade. Today, you do it 2 or 3 times in a year. You constantly have to innovate. We hear this word innovation. We hear this term that says, I'm changing my business model. Well, that's what transformation is. And if you look at my logo, it says evolving ideas. So what is change? A new idea, either mine, originated by me, or an idea originated by somebody which is a threat or an opportunity to me as a business. I have to adapt to it very, very quickly. And I need a partner who helps me adapt the people, the process, the knowledge, and the technology. That's Nihilent.
Yeah, sir, very well said. So next question is, you are also one of the early movers in the South African tech market. Can you talk about your experience operating out of South Africa and the kind of engagement you do in this part of the world?
So South Africa is a very interesting market. South Africa, for the African continent and all the way up to the Middle East, is sort of the equivalent of the home for multinationals like America is. So they're very large companies that are headquartered out of SA and then have business operations from Australia to South America. I mean, they've got operations in Europe, in Asia. So we service clients like that, whether it's insurance companies, whether it's banks, giant media companies operates on almost 100 locations in the world, Naspers. The South African businesses, therefore, are fairly global. And South Africa is a very educated place, got great talent. And since we had South African investment originally, the first center we built outside India, we're now building centers elsewhere in the world as well, but the first center we built outside India was in South Africa. We have more than 200 South African employees today. Now, if you think of it in the scale of Nihilent with 2,000 employees globally, that's 10% of my people are South African.
That's great.
So it's a significant number. It will be hard for some of these large competitors of mine who are in the outsourcing business to say 10% of my staff comes from any one country they come from.
Oh.
But that's because they outsource the work and they offshore it. We actually don't. We provide localized service to our customers. I need people who can talk to Nashpurs about how to sell media in Tanzania. I need people who can talk of what the context of current media is, and media is everything that you understand. You're a journalist, you come from that industry. If you look at visual media, for example, I have to contextualize a serial to the market. If it's well contextualized, if I've done good active planning, market research, etc., then the sponsors, the advertisers, advertise on the show. And that's how all these companies make money, right? They make money from the carrying of the advertisement, not just from somebody having a connection or a set-top box. That's not going to pay for the business to survive. So we link the active listening of the social world for this client. People who want Portuguese content, people who want Spanish-speaking content, people who want English-speaking content, Arabic content, Indian content. If you look at Africa, very large Indian diaspora, very wealthy. They want to see soaps from India. So it could be French, it could be in a dozen languages. And you have to find those subscribers and target the advertising at them as well. And that's how you make money. So our whole South African business was designed to help South African multinationals make money in their markets. Very rich market.
That's so challenging.
Yeah, it's an interesting place.
Yeah. So my next question is, you have blended business model, IPs plus services. Can you talk about the proprietary consulting frameworks and the IPs you have developed and their significance?
Very important. If you want to be in the first part of what I described, which is I want to be a partner to a chief X officer, I have to know and understand how to translate his requirement and his view of the world into the processes that are shared between different CXOs and into the technology that supports them. And that is a whole area of IP by itself. So the first piece of IP is something called MCQ. It identifies the type of motivation that is required for a change, end objective, how will you achieve it? Then it looks at what is the type of competence required to do that. Then it looks at what is the level of capability required and what is the capacity required. And finally, the last C is calibration. It then measures how all this competence in this large number of people that you've now trained, let's say, for something, how it's achieving that objective. And that's where technology comes in. So I'm effectively saying there can be a balanced scorecard for everything in a company. And those balanced scorecard approach to business can be used to measure all change. And that change tells you how you succeed. So that's one IP. We have another that does market sensitivity for customers in a sense. So 14 signals is a model which we built that looks at 8 signals of stimulation and 6 signals of experience. And that's what you do in a company. You advertise a form of stimulation, and then you deliver the product, and the customer experiences it. But there could be a gap between the promise that you made in my mind, I'm the buyer. My opinion matters, not yours, Mr. Seller, and not the advertising guy who wrote the jingle. They could both get it wrong. Because the experience is not just the product, it's how you delivered the product to me. It's what the product achieved for me or the service achieved for me. So 14 signals measures that. Now, again, you can't do that without technology. So one technology I mentioned earlier, active listening. You can listen in various languages to what is being said on social media and draw interpretation. You can use technology as we do. I can make you wear a headset. I can study your eye movement. I can study by putting on your camera and mine, and I can analyze this interaction and tell us what you were listening to and what was going through your mind based on the emotions I see, Emoscape. So these are the type of IPs we have. I can also study a system which you have built, an e-commerce platform, let's say, a sales platform, an order invoicing platform. I can use standard metrics to tell you how effective or ineffective that will be. We call that policy D. And how is that possible? For everything that is done, there are heuristics available. Colors on a screen, where you place objects on a screen to draw the eye. And by the way, men and women see the world differently. Our brains are not wired the same, first of all. So if my product audience is predominantly women, I have to keep in mind that the design of the screen will look different. And this is exactly what you pay advertisers to do. They prepare an ad for the same, what looks like the same product, differently for a female audience and a male audience, an audience over 50 and an audience below 50, an audience below 30 and an audience over 30. So segmenting by age, segmenting by gender, segmenting by ethnic type. I would not sell, and everybody would accept that, to an Indian the same way I would sell, and there's no generic concept called an Indian. But the same way I would sell to somebody in Europe, another generic concept that doesn't exist. I would have to make it location specific. And that's exactly what advertising does.
Yes.
How do you translate that into the e-world where some half-wit of a, and pardon my language, but I have to use very harsh terms, some poor half-wit of a programmer who is not trained in psychology, color, design, emotion, thinking. You take a guy who's technically supremely skilled at a job which is coding. And now you ask him to prepare a screen where he should have known everything else that I just described. So the poor guy is an idiot. He doesn't know. He has no clue. So there's two things you can do. You can train people to write code that way. This is exactly what's happening with UX training and RX training and all that goes on today. And you can build tools that analyze the output of programmers and go and tell them what they got wrong, policy D. So we have got several hundred heuristics which are run against a system. And the designers and the coders are told, oops, don't do this, oops, don't do that, redesign it this way. Somebody reads from right to left, somebody reads from left to right. But I'm not talking of script reading. People's minds are wired to look at a screen from right to left or left to right. And certain stereotypes exist of how people's brains will work. And depending on the audience, and this is all part of PhD theses that have been written about it by psychologists, by physiologists, by people in optics. There are entire courses on this. The IDF, for example, Interaction Design Facility, which is a training course from Norway, sort of like what IKEA people use when they design their global products, has more than 30 modules which you can study. From photography to light, to the science of psychology, to understanding how to simply design a dashboard so my eye goes to the one thing I should see. So the dashboard for a CFO would draw him towards numbers that deal with finance. The same dashboard with the same numbers cannot be presented to a chief of sales. He's not interested in that because his brain is not wired to look at the numbers the way the CXO looks at it. He's a CFO. As a sales head, he looks at the numbers differently. So we have IP in doing that.
Okay. That's interesting. So, sir, moving to my next question. You have recently launched a campaign called Humanizing Technology. What exactly you are trying to drive home? Please share your insight on this.
So I just on that in the last part of what I talked of. So it's great. You've got technology. And now you've got this massive meaningless MIS, and I can dump it all on a screen. And you know what? In the old days, at least we used a laptop. Right now, I'm not using a laptop. I'm using a tablet. So it's a smaller screen. But most of the time, this is what we use, a phone.
Right.
And not even a big one. You may have a small phone. Now, how do I condense the gist of the information that you want if I don't even know what device you have? And thus we get into the domain of humanizing technology. Technology can be a monster to use. It can be so difficult, it's so off-putting that I don't want to do it. And that's what used to happen in the old days with systems that people wrote. Government departments came up with e-filing, and it was so unusable. Or banks came up with ways to do things, and it was unusable because it was designed, as I said, by programmers, not by users. So humanizing technology is when you take all the other stuff I described and put that in front, and then generate the spec for what the coder does out of that. Now the technology is being designed to serve the actual consumer. He doesn't realize it, but everything is designed to work for him. which means the system becomes far more interactive, which means the amount of data I store on you begins to grow. And of course, I get into the domain problem that I talked of 2 questions back: confidentiality, privacy. I don't want you to have all this information on me. I don't want you to know I've got a child and I'm going to shop for my child, or I'm out shopping right now. These are all the domains which today law is being written to prevent you crossing. And at the same time, if you're not willing to share that information, how do I make the system usable? So humanizing technology is putting the human being in all our conflict. We are very conflicted creatures. We're very intelligent, huge brain, very conflicted. All our conflict in the center of the equation. Not the company, not the guy whose service is being sold, not Nike's shoe or New Balance's shoe or Kishko's spoon or United Airlines ticket, but rather the person traveling, the person using the spoon, or the person who's going to wear the shoe. How do you put him at the center of the equation? Now the approach to design changes. That's design thinking. So humanizing technology is where design thinking comes to play. Companies like IDEO and Frog have become huge just doing that for product. And we don't blink twice when we buy an IKEA product which has been designed to be humanized. That thing is designed to fit into my living room. It's designed for me to be able to use and be comfortable using. And it's very simplistic. It can be artistic and yet simplistic. How do I make software technology behave the same way? Because nothing about software is designed to be simplistic or human.
Right, sir.
That's humanizing technology, putting the human being back in the equation.
Right. So, sir, my next question is, if you look at the next 12 months, what will be the 2 business priorities that you will be pursuing aggressively, and some of the technologies that will have a greater adoption as we move forward?
So I don't know what technology will have greater adoption. All technologies will have equal adoption. But one thing is very clear, and that's how we see the world. More and more information will be used by companies, and more information will be made available constantly. Now that underlying that is your cloud, underlying that is the giant databases that people are building in the cloud, underlying that is the fact that aggregators are coming to play in a bigger and bigger way. And you can see that, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's IBM, all the big players are becoming aggregators. All the service providers are joining these aggregators to create more and more interlinked product, seamless product. So I see something, I want to click on it right there and then and make a purchase decision. And despite the fact that I said a couple of minutes back that I'm very protective about my data, I actually want you to store my credit card data and use it because I'm lazy. That's humanizing. I don't want to have to re-enter it every time. There are some people who will want to. You have to give them the option to do all those 14 steps every time. There are people who don't want to.
Exactly.
And there will be people who don't want to touch a screen anymore. They want to speak and tell the product. So you have to have voice recognition and every other form of technology that will come to play. So the mantra will be, and this is what I have been talking of for the last year to people: connected, automated, and shared. Everything. And by the way, that's the crux of humanizing. Everything is about connected, automated, and shared. Tesla's car will be shared. He's launching automated cars, Mr. Right?
Right.
Mr. Musk has been very clear that he doesn't want a driver in a car. He says drivers cause accidents. He's not wrong. Drivers cause accidents. Cars don't cause accidents. Roads don't cause accidents. Passengers don't cause accidents. Drivers don't cause accidents. If a robot, drivers cause accidents when they are humans. Automated, robot as well. Now, if it's automated, then shared takes on an entirely new meaning, because why should I own a car? I need something picked up, I ask for it, and if I need a car to do it, a car will. If I need a drone to do it, and there should be no difference in a car and a drone. There should be no difference. It's a form of transport. It could be a very large drone, could be a rocket ship drone. Amazon's boss Bezos just went up in a rocket. That's a drone. There was no pilot flying. There was no astronaut who was trained to fly it. That thing flew itself with ground control, right? So if everything is automated and shared, then it's connected. Just imagine that's the answer to your question. What is coming in technology? That's what's coming.
Right. Very well said. So, sir, my last question. Your journey is very inspiring. So, what would you like to give any message to our youngster?
Read much more about what people want rather than trying to study narrow areas. I keep telling everybody this, whether they're lawyers, whether they're accountants, and we deal with all sorts of professions, whether they're software engineers, hardware engineers, makers of aeroplanes, hospitals, doctors. You have to read much more about how people use things in the world and bother less about what your academics gave you, because that's a platform for one very narrow part of your profession. And I can see this with every form of business we circuit and we service, whether it's, as I said, manufacturing a plane. Well, the nature of the airplane industry is changing. Whether it's hospitals, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, COVID just showed us that. And COVID showed the whole world that the nature of the industry changed right before our eyes, under our feet. Whether it's all the equipment makers who've had to realize how their equipment has to survive when they can't get service people to it. That's what COVID showed you. So my advice to youngsters has been for the last decade the same. Go out and read a lot more outside the narrow area that you're studying. And that applies to young professionals as well. They're so focused on the one job that they do that they don't realize where that job, that task, that service, that thing that they do, where it fits in the larger world picture. But all successful entrepreneurs, all successful senior managers succeed because they've taken the time out to look at it from that perspective. And the ones who do it very young are the ones who launch a unicorn.
So thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time.
Thank you.
It was very pleasure to meet you. And so for all viewers, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and you can also download our Envoy Excellency mobile app from your Play Store. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best to you.